Hello everyone! Today we're taking a look at a game in early access that goes by the name of Seraph. This is something I've been wanting to take a look at for a while, but I had a bit of a setback. My progress was lost, and I'll have to get into that a little bit later when the relevant part of the video comes in, but for now let's just get into what it is. Seraph is a 2D action platformer, as the devs describe it. It is developed by Dreadbit, and it's got elements of action RPG, elements of twin-stick shooter, elements of Metroidvania almost, although it is not one of those. What it really is a platformer and high combat action kind of 2D combat shooter. And it is, as you're probably already noticing in the background, well, first of all, you'll notice that I'm really bad at it. And secondly, you'll be noticing that it's very fast-paced, very smooth, and man is it really smooth to play. It is extremely satisfying to dash all around the place, and you're expected to basically constantly keep your wits about you the entire time, and moving, dodging, blasting away, all the while keeping a keen eye on your surroundings to make sure that the various enemy types don't ambush you horribly and kill you, is all very important. Now, you'd think that I would actually be kind of good at it by now, but I'm about 5 hours of gameplay in, so it's not that far, and I haven't quite gotten used to all the different enemy types yet. And we'll get onto that because of the difficulty system a little bit later, which is one of my favorite parts of the game. But it is a tough game. It doesn't start out particularly difficult, and for a lot of people that are more used to this, it probably wouldn't be too challenging at first, but for me it's a little tough to get all the dodge timings right and stuff. I've been playing a lot of Enter the Gungeon again lately, and I'm used to the dodge roll timings and that, and they are completely different, obviously. So what you're seeing right here is a locked door, and some of the levels there will be one of these locked doors, a high security door, and there'll be a terminal somewhere near it that you are meant to visit the terminal, activate it, and then dash to the door as quickly as you can before it closes, or else you'll have to do it all over again, and get to the actual door. And I died because I suck. And in one of those doors is usually some good chests, sometimes a codex entry for some lore, a bunch of resources, a power-up, which in this case was double damage, and that big green glowing thing I collected, which was a checkpoint rune. And that is, well, I should explain the death system now, and why it can be a bit of a problem sometimes. So you'll notice that now my health gauge has a maximum chunk taken out of it. My maximum health does. When you die in this game, you'll see those little dagger-looking symbols above the health gauge to the left of my level. You have 2 of them, and I now have 1 of them. Those are resurrection charges, and those represent your ability to come back, essentially like lives. And those are replenished back to 2 every time you begin a new level. And when you die, you will restart at the beginning of the level. It doesn't respawn or heal any of the enemies or anything like that, but you will have a chunk of your maximum health taken away. And you can do that twice. The second time you die in a level, which I think you'll see in this footage if I remember correctly. I'm actually doing this in post this time. Not something I do all the time, but I decided to do it this time because of the amount of focus this game takes, and I wanted to give you guys some at least not too awful gameplay. I get a little bit better later on. I'm still getting used to the game, though. And the last life, the third life that you get, your maximum health is reduced heavily, and you've got to be very careful. But if you're to die, as in a full-on game over, you lose all of your lives on a level, that's a game over, and you go back to the title screen. Now, this is not a permadeath game. It has obviously been influenced by roguelites, but it is not one of those. And it does not have permadeath, but it has a system where you will go back, if that does happen, and you lose all your lives on a level, to, yeah, that's where I died again, to your last activated checkpoint rune. And that's why finding those rooms with the big green checkpoints in them in a level is important, because not every one of those levels will have one of those, and if you are to lose all of your lives, that is where you will start again. So you want to get those as often as possible to keep your progress. The thing is, sometimes, okay, you know, the game is in early access, so there are going to be some bugs, and some amount of bugginess is, of course, acceptable in early access. The thing is, sometimes the checkpoint system doesn't seem to work. Normally what happens when you die is you are asked to continue. And you continue with your levels and everything intact back at the last activated level where the checkpoint rune that you last got was. But the first time this happened to me, I was in this exact level, in fact, and I died, lost all my lives, and it did not give me the option to continue. The only option I had was to start an entirely new game and lose all of my progress. Back at level 1, with none of my things selected, I kept my crafting unlocks and my shards, which is something that I'll explain after this level is over, but the actual level progress and the level of my character and everything was reset. So that's why I'm not as far into the game in this video as I would have liked to have filmed for you guys, but I decided I really, you know, it's been long enough for me to get this video out because I've been wanting to get it out. So that's why. It's a neat system. I like the idea that you're given multiple lives in a level. You just have the penalty of losing some health a couple of times. But the checkpoint system does need to work more reliably, because that is a bit scary. The idea that sometimes you can completely lose all of your progress if the checkpoint decides to just not register for some reason. It's a bit weird. But anyway, that caveat aside, the game is high action all the time, very high octane, very snappy, and it is meant to be played at a nice high 60 FPS frame rate, which is always good to see, as the actual Steam page says. Developers not only supporting, but encouraging a high frame rate is always good to see, and a controller is recommended for this one. It's not necessary, but I find that it works a bit better with a controller due to the directionality of dodging, the way that you need to have fairly precise control over where you are dodging. The blink that you're seeing constantly is important, and an analog stick helps with that. Also, you may have noticed that there's no aiming reticle or anything. You actually aim automatically there. You don't aim yourself, and I'll get into that in just a second, because here's the level up system. So whenever you level up, you will be given a choice. These were originally empty, of these blessings, and you can choose. They will give you sort of random choices, and eventually, every time you level up, you'll select one of these until all 4 of your slots are full, and it will kind of shuffle them depending on what slots are open at the time, each level. And then, after that, you can put levels again into those blessings to make their effects more potent, their various passive abilities. Now this is the shard system, and shards are basically like a passive skill tree, essentially. You can see here that there are various rarities of shards, and you can craft 3 of one rarity into 1 of the next rarity of shard, and they can be slotted into this, which is sort of like a skill tree. They are oaths, as they are called, and the higher rarity of shard that you slot into each oath, the higher the effect will be, as you can see in the list there. So I'm customizing essentially a build mostly based on miracles, which are your sort of almost like spells. They are big abilities that you can have 2 of equipped at any given time, as well as a 3rd that you will always have for a particular reason called Smite. And there are 3 trees, and you need a particular value in shards to get further into the tree. Sort of like how in a lot of skill trees you need, say, you know, you must spend 10 skill points in this tier before you unlock tier 3, things like that. It's that kind of system, just in a straight line, essentially, instead of a tree format. So the build I'm going with right now is that, and these shards are dropped either as full shards from enemies or in fragments that you actually assemble 3 of to form a shard, depending on the difficulty of the game, which is, again, something I'll get into. This is a kind of a process here, is the higher chance of dropping better rarity shards. Or, of course, you can craft them yourself from 3 of the previous rarity. Now, this is the transmutation system. This is crafting. You will drop, demons will drop various things, and that was kind of done there pretty quick, but demons drop various bits of their bodies and things. Different demons have different drops, as well as terminescence, which is that blue crystal and stuff that you see all the time that just about everything drops. And that is used in almost everything, but specific materials are used in more specific recipes. You can craft different weapons, which will then be able to appear in weapon lockers and levels. You will also be able to craft wards, which is that little amethyst ring in the top left that you see. Wards are temporary defensive items that give you different statistics. In this case, it's usually physical protection, unholy damage protection, maximum health, things like that, and different gemstones give a different amount of different ones of those. Some don't give any of certain ones, and some give more of others. And they have a certain durability, that's why I say they're temporary. As you get hit, that durability goes down, and when it hits 0, you lose the ward and have to find another one. So you'll want to make choices as you find them and loot lockers around the level as to which one you want to go with right now, and crafting new types of them and higher levels of them gives you more potent, more durable versions of them to find in the levels, as well as crafting higher levels of weapons. When you craft a new weapon, you don't automatically equip it, except for the pistols, which you always have, as they are your infinite ammo weapon that you'll always have access to. They are essentially you're unlocking access to find that weapon in the level. And every weapon except for your pistols has a limited ammo capacity. And you will find more ammo in those right there, those blue chests. There are also yellow chests that drop experience motes and health drops occasionally. And there are also the weapon lockers that you'll find that you'll probably see me going near occasionally. I'm doing very poorly. And the weapon lockers can have any of the weapons you've currently actually unlocked or crafted. And you can then choose if you want to replace your primary or not. And you can also disintegrate the weapon in the locker for metal parts, which is a crafting material used to actually create higher levels of weapons. As you can see, I have the pistols Mark II right now and a railgun Mark II, because I've actually crafted that version of the weapon twice in order to upgrade its statistics, its rate of fire, its damage, its range, its penetration, because the railgun, of course, can go through multiple enemies, as can some other weapons, etc., etc. Now, the combat is very satisfying in this game. All of the weapons so far are pretty fun to use. The pistols are, of course, fairly weak feeling because they are your infinite ammo standby secondary that you always have, but they're still fairly interesting because this game has a lot of like gun kata influence in it, where your character, since she automatically aims, she'll often target enemies in a rather stylish way, you know, shooting at 2 enemies at once. You can dash all around the walls, hanging on walls, and shooting enemies with one of the pistols, or say, you know, backflipping through the air and firing at enemies at the same time. There's a lot of very well animated gun kata-esque action in this game, which is always cool to see, and not enough games do that. Usually it's pretty much spectacle fighter games only that do this kind of thing. And this game actually has several elements of spectacle fighters in it, only in a 2D shooter format, which is very interesting. It is a neat step in a different direction for the genre, really, that I've not quite seen before. And it's always good to see that. I like to see evolutions of a genre that a lot of people probably have seen and enjoyed before, but have never really experienced taken in this direction, in this way. Now, the primary weapons, the ammo-using ones, the railgun, the shotgun, you have machine pistols, you've got revolvers, all kinds of weapons. There's a pretty good variety of them, and they've all so far been really satisfying to use and very interesting. Those are the auto pistols right there. Those are really fun to use because you can target multiple enemies with them since they're dual-wielded. And also there are some skill tree, oaths that actually affect targeting multiple enemies at once and things like that, and they are very stylish and fun to use. The shotgun is hugely satisfying because it's a big, heavy thump of a weapon, just this big kind of, well, I mean, it's a shotgun, so you would expect that, but in a 2D game, that kind of weapon feedback that you would expect from, say, a first-person shooter isn't necessarily present, but in this case, it is very, very present, and it feels great to actually fire the weapons. They have very good sound assets. They, shooting demons with various cool guns never really gets old, and pretty much any game you can do it. Anything from the classic standby of Doom to the new age reboot of Shadow Warrior, it is very satisfying, and this is no different from those in that regard. Now, the difficulty system is interesting. I actually really like this, because the difficulty is actually scaling. You'll notice it says 4.63 down there. Now, the games that do scaling difficulty don't always do it well, but I find that this game actually does it mostly well. Essentially, the more you play, the higher the difficulty goes. It starts at 1.0, although if you want, you can choose to start it on hard, which is at 4, or even harder, which is at like 7 or something ridiculous like that, which I can't even imagine. I'd probably die almost immediately, because I'm that bad. But it is a scaling difficulty level that gets higher and higher as you play. And the better you do, the less you get hit, the faster you kill things, the more this goes up. And the interesting thing about it is a higher difficulty doesn't just mean enemies have more health, enemies do more damage, because that's kind of a boring way to do difficulty. Actually, the way it works is, not only are those things true, but new types of enemies will appear. For instance, there's one of the recent updates added a completely new enemy type that you only find at difficulties 5.0 and above. So you will constantly be being introduced to new demon types, depending on what difficulty level you are at. And also, the various demon types have many attacks that they can use, from melee swings to different kinds of projectiles to, you know, gouts of flame that spout up from the ground to those instant, like, sniper blue lasers that you have to have very specific dodge timings to avoid, to the slow, homing, purplish orbs and things like that. All kinds of different attacks that take very different strategies to dodge. Those are all kinds of things. Enemies have all sorts of attacks, but they gain access to those attacks as the difficulty goes higher, which I find really cool. So the enemies are made more and more interesting and more diverse as the difficulty goes up, which I find to be one of the best ways to do difficulty. Don't just make the enemies hit harder, make them more difficult to fight. Make you memorize more attacks, make the dodge timings more complicated by introducing new attacks, things like that. And that's what this game does. So that's the current state of Seraph right now. That's pretty much how the game works. It's got a pretty neat little story developing as well, and the boss fights are also quite challenging. So this is a little video to show you the current state in early access of Seraph, a very cool little unique take on the 2D sort of action platformer genre. A shooter with some spectacle fighter-esque and action RPG elements. A new take on a genre that we've seen pretty much since the beginning of time that really takes it in a direction that I really appreciate and am very excited to see how it continues to develop. So, as for the feedback section, really, I just say more variety is good. I think more miracles, more weapons, of course. It's hard to argue with, you know, more variety in a game like this. I think that the player feedback could be improved a little bit. Explaining the difficulty system to the player a little bit better and something more than just loading screen tips, I think would be a little better. And also explaining what all of those symbols above the enemies mean sometimes, because you actually have to go to the codex to actually look them up. And I think maybe a different way to introduce you to them, maybe? Like not necessarily like this long drawn-out tutorial, but something like that. Anyway, this is Seraph. I've had a lot of fun with it. It is available right now on Steam for $15, or right now, because of the summer sale, for like $9. So go and pick it up if it's interesting to you. This has been Seraph. Thank you very much for watching, guys. And I suppose that's it for now. I'll see you guys next time.